My sister-in-law reported my 7-year-old son to his school principal for cheating on a reading competition. She thought being married to my brother gave her the right to do whatever she wanted. She was wrong. I had the receipts, I had the recordings, and I had a lease agreement with her name on it. This is where the story truly begins. I work as a licensed occupational therapist at a pediatric clinic about 20 minutes from our house. My days are built around patients, helping kids relearn how to hold a pencil, how to button a shirt, how to exist in a world that wasn't quite designed for them. I am not someone who raises her voice. I am not someone who makes scenes. I solve problems with documentation and a very calm demeanor that my coworkers sometimes joke makes me seem like a robot. I am not a robot. But I have learned that the quieter you are, the louder your paperwork speaks. My husband and I bought our house 6 years ago, a 3-bedroom craftsman bungalow in a suburb of Columbus, Ohio. We also inherited a duplex from his parents when they passed, the left unit vacant at the time, the right unit rented to a retired teacher who had lived there for 12 years. When my brother and his wife hit a rough patch financially about 2 years ago, his landscaping business had a bad winter, and they were 3 months behind on rent at their old apartment, I suggested they move into the vacant left unit. Market rate in that neighborhood was running about $1,400 a month. I charged them $600. I told my husband it was the right thing to do. He agreed, though I remember the look on his face when he said it. The look that said he hoped I knew what I was starting. I want to be fair about my sister-in-law, whose name is Ingrid. She's not a cartoonishly evil person. She's the kind of person who is deeply, constantly insecure about everything, and has learned to cope with that insecurity by winning, by making sure the people around her are slightly smaller than she is. She married my brother 8 years ago, and for the first few years I genuinely liked her. She was funny and sharp and she threw great dinner parties. But as the kids got older, she has a daughter named Brittna, who is 8, and my son Jonah is 7. Something shifted. Brittna is a sweet, dreamy little girl who loves horses and takes forever to read a single page. Jonah has been reading chapter books since he was 5. He taught himself fractions from a YouTube video when he was 6 because he thought it was interesting. I didn't push him. If anything, I had to remind him that other kids his age weren't doing that he didn't need to mention it at every family dinner. The comparison started small. It always does. Thanksgiving 2 years ago, Ingrid mentioned, smiling, that Britain's reading was age-appropriate, which is all that matters. Some parents just push too hard. She was looking at the centerpiece when she said it. I let it go. At Easter last year, she told my mother-in-law that Jonah seemed intense for his age. It's probably the screen time. Jonah was in the other room playing Uno with his cousins and had not said a single intense thing that day. I let that go too. I'm good at letting things go. Or I was, until I wasn't. The school in our district runs a spring reading challenge every year for first and second graders. Kids laud the books they finish over 6 weeks. At the end, the top 3 readers in each grade win a ribbon and a small gift card to the local bookstore, and their names go on a banner in the school hallway. It's genuinely low stakes. It is not the Olympics. But Brittna and Jonah are 1 grade apart at the same school, and Ingrid treated it like the qualifying round for something that mattered enormously. Jonah read 41 books in 6 weeks. I know because I signed his reading log every night, and I remember thinking it was a lot but also very on brand for him. He finished first in the 2nd grade. Brittna finished 4th in 1st grade, 1 spot off the podium. The results were posted on the school's parent portal on a Thursday evening in April. My phone rang at 9:04 that night. It was Ingrid. I almost didn't answer. I was putting Jonah to bed and I was tired, the kind of tired that settles into your shoulders after a long week. But she was my sister-in-law and she lived 40 feet away, so I picked up. She didn't say hello. She said, "There is no way Jonah read 41 books." I stood in the hallway outside Jonah's room and kept my voice level. He did, actually. I signed the log every night. Lauren, that was what she called me. Not my actual name, my name is Callie, but she'd been calling me Lauren for 2 years, and I had never corrected her because I kept thinking it would be awkward to bring it up later. Kids don't read 41 books in 6 weeks unless someone is gaming the system. Those were supposed to be read independently. He reads independently, I said. That's kind of his thing. Britta worked really hard, Ingrid said, and her voice cracked slightly. She really wanted that ribbon. I know. I'm sorry she didn't get it. Jonah worked hard too. There was a pause. Then she said, "I think you should talk to his teacher about returning the prize. It isn't fair." I told her goodnight and hung up. I didn't think much of it after that. I thought she'd called in a moment of frustration and would feel embarrassed about it in the morning. I even drafted a text to her the next day, something gentle about how Brittna was a great reader and the competition didn't mean anything. I didn't send it because my lunch break got busy and I forgot. What I didn't know was that while I was forgetting to send that text, Ingrid was driving to the school. I found out on a Monday. Jonah's teacher, a woman named Ms. Park who I genuinely adore, called me at 11 a.m. while I was between patients. She said she needed to tell me something, and her voice had that careful, uncomfortable quality that tells you someone is about to share information they wish they didn't have to share. She told me that a parent, she didn't say who, but the detail she shared next made it obvious, had come in on Friday morning and filed a formal complaint with the principal. The complaint alleged that Jonah had not read the books independently, that I had read them to him or read them aloud while he was in the room, and that this violated the competition rules. The parent had further alleged that Jonah had a history of being given unfair academic advantages, and that the school should investigate whether he had been receiving outside tutoring that other kids didn't have access to. She had asked, and this was the part that made my stomach drop, that the ribbon and gift card be rescinded and awarded to the next child on the list. Brittna was next on the list. I sat in the hallway of the clinic on a plastic chair, and I breathed very carefully for about 30 seconds. Miss Pertendess, Park was still talking. She said the principal had asked her to document the conversation. She said she had told the principal that in her professional opinion, Jonah's reading level was consistent with the child who genuinely read at that pace, and that she had no reason to question his log. She said she was calling me because she felt I deserved to know, and also because she wanted me to know that she was not recommending any action against Jonah. I thanked her. I asked her to document the entire complaint, including who filed it, in writing, and to email it to me. She did, within the hour. I drove home from work that evening on autopilot. My husband, whose name is Derek, I should say, I'll call him my husband here. He was already home and he could tell from the way I walked in and set my bag down that something had happened. I told him. I watched his face go through 5 emotions in about 8 seconds. He wanted to call his sister immediately. I told him to wait. I needed to think first. Here's the thing about being the person who always handles things calmly. People sometimes mistake your calm for passivity. Ingrid had been mistaking it for years. She thought I was the type who would absorb this, feel bad, maybe quietly cry about it, and then show up at the next family dinner pretending everything was fine because I was too conflict-averse to address it. She had lived in my property for 2 years at less than half market rate. She had accepted my help when she needed it. And then she had walked into my son's school and told the principal that I was helping him cheat. I opened my laptop and started a document. I titled it, internally, the file. I wrote down everything. The phone call on Thursday night. The exact words she used. The time, 9:14 p.m. I wrote down the call from Ms. Park. I wrote down the contents of the emailed complaint documentation. Then I went to my phone and I found the lease agreement in my email, and I reread it. The duplex lease I had drafted with a property attorney 2 years ago, which Ingrid and my brother had both signed. Section 11. Tenant shall not engage in conduct that disturbs, harasses, or damages the interests of the property owner or members of the property owner's household. Making a false complaint to my son's school about my son was, I was fairly confident, the kind of thing that fell under damages to my interests. I called my property attorney the next morning. Her name is Yolanda, and she has known me since I was 26 and bought the duplex with money I had been saving since my first job out of college. I explained the situation. She was quiet for a moment and then she said, "Do you want to send them a notice?" I said yes. 30 days or 60? I said 30. She said she'd have the paperwork ready by end of week. That same evening, my brother came to our front door. He knocked instead of ringing the bell, which I had always found slightly odd about him, and when I opened the door he looked exactly the way I expected him to look. Tired, anxious, caught in the middle of something he hadn't signed up for. He is 3 years older than me, and in some ways he has never quite grown into the space he takes up. He is a genuinely kind person who has spent the last several years slowly disappearing into Ingrid's version of their life. I asked him in. My husband stayed in the kitchen. This was my conversation to have. He sat at the dining table and immediately said, "She shouldn't have done that." "No," I said, "she shouldn't have done." She was upset. Brittna was really upset. And you know how Ingrid gets when Brittna is upset? I know how Ingrid gets when Brittna is upset. I know how Ingrid gets, I said. That's not the same as it being okay. He rubbed his eyes. He looked like he hadn't slept well. "What are you going to do?" I told him about the attorney. I told him about the 30-day notice. I watched his face go from tired to pale. "Callie," he said. "Come on." It was a reading competition. "She filed a formal complaint with the principal of Jonah's school," I said. "In writing. Alleging that I helped my son cheat. That is in his school file. That could affect how his teachers perceive him. He is 7 years old." I paused. "She did that because Britta didn't get a ribbon. She tried to take something from my son because she was angry." "I know it was wrong." I told her it was wrong. "When?" He didn't answer that. "She's sorry," he said eventually. "Has she said eventually? Has she said that to me?" He was quiet again. "She wants to talk?" he said. "She thought maybe the four of us could sit down." "The school has a written record of a formal complaint filed against my son," I said, as quietly as I could. "Until that complaint is formally withdrawn and the record is corrected, I don't have anything to talk about." He left about 20 minutes later. He didn't hug me on the way out. I stood at the window and watched him walk back across the driveway to the left unit, and I felt a grief that was very specific and very old, the grief of watching someone you love choose the easier thing. The next morning I got a text from Ingrid. "I know you're upset, but you're being dramatic." It was a question I raised with the school. I never said Jonah cheated. I just asked them to look into it. "You're acting like I accused him of a crime." "Brittna deserved that ribbon. She worked just as hard. This is just favoritism because you're the property owner and you think that means you get to win at everything." I screenshot the text. I emailed it to myself and to Yolanda. Then I called Ms. Park and asked her to confirm, in writing, whether the formal complaint had been withdrawn. She called the principal's office while I held. It had not been withdrawn. I asked her to document that I had made this inquiry, and that I was requesting a meeting with the principal to discuss the complaint formally and ensure Jonah's record was clear. She scheduled it for that Thursday. At the principal meeting, I brought the original reading log. I still had it, and 3 photos I had taken throughout the reading challenge of Jonah sitting in various corners of our house with various books. I hadn't taken the photos for any strategic reason. I just take a lot of pictures of my kid. But there they were, time-stamped, books visible, 7-year-old absorbed and cross-legged on a beanbag chair that had been a Christmas gift from Ingrid herself. The principal, a measured man named Mr. Osei, reviewed everything. He was clearly uncomfortable. He told me in careful language that the complaint had been filed in good faith, that the school had an obligation to document parental concerns, and that he had reviewed Jonah's academic record and found no evidence of any irregularity. He said the complaint would remain in the administrative file but that no action had been or would be taken. He said Jonah's ribbon and gift card stood. I asked whether the complaint would appear anywhere in Jonah's transferable school record. He said no. I asked whether any of Jonah's teachers had been notified of the complaint or asked to treat him differently. He said no. I thanked him, shook his hand, and before I left I said, very calmly, that I intended to send a formal letter requesting that the complaint be marked as unsubstantiated in the administrative file and that I expected confirmation in writing. He said that was my right. I walked to my car in the school parking lot and sat there for a minute with my hands in my lap. I thought about Jonah. I thought about him asking me that week why Brittna hadn't come over to play and me telling him she was busy. I thought about him, at 7, being completely unaware that an adult had gone to his school and tried to take something from him because her own child hadn't won a competition. I thought about what it would mean for him to know that someday. The weight of that was enormous. I drove home and I called my mother. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she said, "You're doing the right thing." She has a gift for saying exactly the thing I need to hear without making me feel like I need permission. The 30-day notice arrived at the duplex on a Friday via certified mail. Yolanda used the lease violation clause, tenant conduct affecting the interests of the property owner's household, and cited the formal school complaint as the specific incident. She had drafted it cleanly and without drama. It was a legal document, not a letter. It simply stated that the tenancy was being terminated in 30 days, and that the unit was to be vacated by the date specified. I was at work when my brother called. I let it go to voicemail. He called 3 more times. Then Ingrid called twice. I let all of it go to voicemail. That evening she texted my husband, "You need to talk to your wife. This is insane. We have nowhere to go. We have a child." I made a complaint at a school. "That's a parent's right, and she's evicting us like we're strangers. She's doing this to control us. She has always resented me. I want to talk to her right now." My husband showed me the text. I told him he didn't need to respond. Then she posted something on Facebook. She didn't name me directly, but she wrote a long post about how family could be the most painful source of betrayal, how some people used financial leverage to punish anyone who disagreed with them, and how she was navigating a situation that had broken her heart. The comments filled up quickly. Women from her mom group and Brittany's dance class left supportive messages. They didn't know anything about what had actually happened, and she hadn't told them. She had just framed herself as the victim of a cold, controlling person, and let them fill in the rest. A woman I'd met once at a school fundraiser sent me a message. It said, thinking of Ingrid, "I hope you can find compassion in your heart." I didn't respond to that either. What I did do was start keeping a folder. Every text, every voicemail, every Facebook post, every communication where Ingrid contacted my husband about me rather than contacting me directly. Yolanda had mentioned, without being asked, that a pattern of indirect harassment was relevant if things escalated. I wasn't sure they would, but I was not going to be caught without documentation again. My brother came back to the house about a week into the 30 days. This time, he wasn't sheepish, he was angry. He stood on the front porch and told me I was destroying his family. He said Ingrid had done something stupid, yes, but I was taking it too far. He said Britta was crying every night because she was scared about moving. He said I had always had it easier than him, and I was using the property to punish him for not having his life together. I listened to all of it. I had kept the front door between us. When he finished, I said, "Your wife filed a written complaint alleging that I coached my 7-year-old to cheat in a reading competition. She did it because Brittany didn't get a ribbon. She tried to damage my son's school record. She has not apologized. She has not withdrawn the complaint. And you are standing here telling me that I'm the problem?" He stared at me. "I love you," I said. "I'm not changing my mind." He left. He didn't say goodbye. The 30 days were not quiet. Ingrid called my clinic's front desk twice and asked to speak to me. The receptionist told her I was with patients, which was true both times. She called my mother and told her that I was unstable and that my behavior was damaging our whole family. My mother listened politely and then called me and said, "She's panicking." I said I knew. My mother said, "Good." 12 days before the vacate date, I got a call from the school again. This time it was Mr. O'Sacey's assistant. Someone had called the school, not Ingrid this time, or not obviously, and left an anonymous tip on the school's general voicemail line saying that Jonah had been the one who had been bullying Brittany, not the other way around, and that I had been intimidating school staff. The assistant read me the complaint in full. When she finished, I thanked her and asked for a copy. I called Yolanda and read it to her. She was quiet for a second and then she said, "She's getting desperate." I said I knew. This is going to be very useful at the formal hearing if she pursues the civil route she mentioned. Ingrid had, through my brother, threatened a lawsuit. She claimed that the eviction was retaliatory and violated tenant rights, and that I had no legal basis to terminate the lease over a protected parental activity like filing a school complaint. I had looked up Ohio tenant protections carefully. Filing a formal complaint alleging fraud against a minor was not, to my understanding, a protected parental activity that superseded lease terms. Yolanda concurred, but she said to keep everything. I kept everything. The day they moved out, I didn't go to the duplex. I had arranged for a property manager from a local firm to oversee the move-out inspection. I had told my brother in writing 2 weeks before that I would not be present and that all questions should go through the management company. I did this partly because I didn't want a confrontation and partly because Yolanda had suggested that any interaction with Ingrid at this point could be mischaracterized later. According to the property manager, who called me that evening, the move-out took most of the day. There were some scuffs on the walls, a broken towel bar in the bathroom, and a stain on the carpet in the second bedroom. Nothing major. He sent me a written report with photos. I sent him a note authorizing him to deduct repairs from the security deposit. My brother texted me that night. He said, "We're at a motel. I want you to know I'm not going to forgive you for this." I read it and put my phone face down. 2 weeks later, he sent another text. This one said, "She told me I should have filed the complaint myself. She said I was weak for not supporting her. I left. I'm staying with a friend. I think we're done." I read that one 3 times. The formal complaint process at the school concluded about a month after they moved out. I had submitted a letter requesting that the original complaint be marked unsubstantiated, supported by the time-stamped reading log, the photos, Miss Park's written account, and a brief letter from Jonah's current teacher affirming his reading level. Mr. Osei responded in writing. The complaint had been reviewed and marked as resolved with no findings. It would not affect Jonah's record in any way. I printed that letter and put it in the fireproof box with the duplex paperwork. Ingrid did not pursue the civil lawsuit. Yolanda thinks the cost of pursuing it, combined with the weakness of the claim, made it not worth it. She had also, by that point, lost the social capital she thought she had. A few of her mom group friends had quietly reached out to parents I knew through the school, and some version of the truth had made its way back around. Not the whole story, but enough. The supportive comments on her Facebook post dwindled. The dinner invitations stopped. The things she had built her identity around, being the one who was liked, being the one who had it together, had gotten very quiet. She got a part-time job. That was something my brother told me later when we started talking again. He said she had gotten a job at a home goods store and had seemed, in some ways, better for it. Less consumed by Brittenda's trajectory. More present in her own life. My brother and Ingrid are separated now. He got an apartment about 15 minutes from us. He and Jonah have dinner together most Wednesday evenings. It started awkwardly. Jonah didn't quite know how to act around an uncle who had been absent for a while, but kids are remarkably good at recalibrating. Now Jonah calls him to ask about sports scores and sends him pictures of books he's finished. My brother started going to a therapist. He told me, about 3 months into the separation, that he had spent a long time allowing Ingrid's insecurities to become his own, and that it had cost him things he was still figuring out how to get back. I told him I wasn't going anywhere. I repainted the left unit and re-rented it in the fall to a couple in their early 30s. She's a nurse, he does something with logistics, who seemed genuinely delighted to have gotten a below-market unit in that neighborhood. They leave a small plant cutting on my doorstep every few weeks. I don't know why. I find it very charming. Jonah started 2nd grade in September. He is currently reading a book about the history of cartography that is meant for adults. He found it at the library and insisted it was exactly what he wanted. His teacher sent me a note last month saying he had given an impromptu explanation of longitude and latitude to his class during a geography lesson and that the other students had been, quote, reasonably engaged. I sat with him the other night while he was reading, not talking, just in the same room. He looked up at one point and said, "Mom, did you know some of the first maps were made by people who had never even been to the places they were mapping? They just made their best guess." I told him that was interesting. He thought about it for a second and said, "That's kind of dishonest." "It is," I said. "Some people are like that." He nodded, apparently satisfied, and went back to his book. There are things I wish had gone differently. I wish Ingrid had called me the next morning and apologized. I wish my brother had told her, clearly and immediately, that filing that complaint was not something a person who loved his sister would do. I wish Brittenda didn't have to grow up watching her mother lose things she didn't need to lose. She is a sweet kid. She deserves better than the example she was given. But I also know this. The moment I found out what Ingrid had done, I had 2 choices. I could absorb it, keep the peace, keep the rent low, and let her believe that she could do whatever she wanted to my family as long as I was invested in keeping things comfortable. Or I could draw a line, not a dramatic line, not a cruel one, just a line that said, "This is where my son's safety and reputation begin. And nothing you need from me is worth more than that." I chose the line. I would choose it again. The ribbon is hanging on Jonah's bookshelf. He doesn't know there was ever a question about it. I plan to keep it that way, for as long as I can, and then one day when he is old enough I will sit down with him and explain it. I will tell him that sometimes the people who are supposed to celebrate you feel threatened instead, and that says nothing about him and everything about them. I will tell him that the right response to someone trying to take something you earned is not to shrink. It's to document everything. Call your attorney and make sure your son knows, every single day, that you will burn down any structure that tries to make him feel small. He'll probably find that a bit dramatic. He'll be right. And I'll mean every word of it. I've thought a lot about what actually caused all of this. Not just the complaint, not just the eviction, the whole chain of it. And the more I sit with it, the more I think it comes down to something pretty simple. Ingrid had spent years mistaking my kindness for weakness, and she kept pulling on that thread until the whole thing unraveled in her hands. I gave her and my brother a below-market unit because I could, and because they needed it. That was a real choice made from a real place. But somewhere along the way, she started reading my generosity as a kind of submission. Like I had handed her something permanent. Like being the one who receives the favor gives you power over the one who extends it. She was wrong about that, and the gap between what she believed and what was actually true, that gap is where all the damage happened. What I keep coming back to is Jonah sitting cross-legged on that beanbag chair with his library book, not knowing any of it was happening. He wasn't trying to beat Britta. He wasn't thinking about her at all. He was just reading because he loves it, the same way he's always loved it, since before he could explain why. And an adult who should have celebrated that, who had eaten dinner at our table, who had watched him grow up, decided that his joy was a threat, that it needed to be dismantled, that a 7-year-old's ribbon belonged to her daughter instead. That decision had consequences, not because I'm some force of cosmic justice, just because actions produce outcomes, and the outcome of filing a false complaint against a child is that the child's mother finds out, and if that mother happens to be your landlord, things get complicated very quickly. I think about Brittany sometimes too. She didn't ask for any of this. She's a sweet kid who wanted a ribbon, and instead, she got a front row seat to watching her mother burn relationships to the ground, chasing something that didn't even matter that much. I hope she grows up with more security than Ingrid has. I hope she learns that other people's accomplishments don't diminish her own. That's not something you can teach by screaming. It's something you absorb slowly from the adults around you, by watching how they handle the moments when things don't go their way. My brother is learning that too, late, and it's hard for him. But he's doing it. That matters. And Jonah, he asked me last week why maps used to be so inaccurate. I told him people made their best guess with what they had. He thought about it and said that seemed like a reasonable excuse, but only up to a point. At some point, you have to go find out for yourself. I thought that was about the most sensible thing I'd heard in a year. He doesn't know his ribbon was ever in question. When the time is right, I'll explain it to him. All of it in words he can understand. I'll tell him that intelligence without integrity doesn't hold up, that documents matter, that quiet persistence outlasts loud aggression almost every time. And I'll tell him that the most important thing you can do when someone tries to take something you earned is not to rage about it. It's to get very calm, get very organized, and let the truth do the heavy lifting. He'll roll his eyes at me. He's 7. That's his job, but I think somewhere under the eye roll he'll understand.